Governor, when I know that you mentioned that you got to know Scott Pruitt, who is the Attorney General of Oklahoma, and as you well know, the Environmental Protection Agency is a pretty challenging situation today in America. In fact, President-elect Trump said the EPA has pursued an out-of-control anti-energy agenda that has destroyed millions of jobs, and Pruitt will reverse this trend and restore the EPA's essential mission of keeping out our air and our water clean and safe. My question is, what are your thoughts about Scott Pruitt from your relationship and how you have observed him as the Attorney General of Oklahoma, and in relationship also to this new assignment that he may have the opportunity to serve his country?
Well, I know Scott Pruitt personally. I know him behind the scenes. I know him as he focuses on challenges that he faces, and together we fought side by side in challenges against the EPA. And here's what I can tell you about Scott Pruitt. He knows the law and he follows the law. And what he was committed to doing was fighting back against a lawless EPA that was refusing to abide by the law, that was making up the rules as they went along. And as a result, farmers and small businesses and ranchers were being crushed by this lawless regime under the EPA. And so it is necessary that we get someone like Scott Pruitt, who's not going to invent the law or make it up. He's going to apply the law as it is supposed to be governed by the Environmental Protection Agency, and hence restore jobs in this nation, but also restore the rule of law in this nation.
Well, the things that I hear about him are excellent. I never had the opportunity to meet him personally, but what I hear from his pastor and many of his friends in the state of Oklahoma and others across the nation, he is obviously a man of deep conviction, very committed to law and order. He's a man where places faith as his number one priority in his life, and he's just trying to be obedient and serve his nation as God has opened up this door. There's obviously a lot of kickback relating to that. Now, part of that is simply because the EPA is perhaps not getting someone that they're used to that would forward their agenda. But what would you tell perhaps people in the midstream, those who are more centrist or even some evangelicals or other faiths about Scott, and that this is a great choice for America? Could you try to bring some balance to the attacks against Attorney General Scott Pruitt?
Well, as someone like myself who knows him personally and behind the scenes, I can tell you he is a man of tremendous character, tremendous faith, puts deep reliance upon his faith in God to guide him in his work. But he's a person who cares about this nation and the future of this nation and the fundamental principles upon which this nation was built. And he wants to restore those principles in the branch of government that he will be operating in.
Well, Governor, just to break it down for our listeners today where we can understand in lay terms, you as the governor of Texas, tell us about, for example, when EPA would bring about some regulation, what that does to harm the energy issue or some economic issues in the country. Can you give us an example or just talk about it for a moment? Because I really want Americans today to understand the practical side of this and what your challenges have been as leaders in our nation with the EPA as it is today.
Right. Listen, there are some regulations that are issued, could be by Washington, D.C., or by your local capital or wherever it is that you may live, and most of those are issued because the legislature or Congress made a law that said that the agency can issue the regulation. The EPA didn't do that. What the EPA did instead is, even though there was no law by Congress authorizing them to come up with a regulation, the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., following their own agenda, as opposed to what Congress allowed them to do, these bureaucrats decided that they would impose the types of regulations that would further a leftist agenda, and in doing so would crush the jobs of middle-class Americans, those who are working every single day just to make a living, doing their best to follow the law, get the hammer from the federal government, crushing their dreams and crushing their ability to make a living. But that's especially true for the farmers and ranchers in this country who live off the land. Let me tell you, these farmers and ranchers, they care more about conservation and taking care of their land than any bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. And Scott Pruitt is a supporter of men and women who believe in God, who believe in the land and private property rights, but get frustrated when the federal government tramples those property rights.